Hi, my name is Sebastian Macaluso, and for my food heritage presentation, I decided to choose the country of Samoa. The reason I decided to choose this country was because growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of Samoan people, and I also have a lot of Samoan friends, so I was fortunate enough to try a lot of different types of foods from this country. I'm also part of a Bible study back at home, and our pastor was recently sent to Samoa to teach the people about the Bible and things like that. So it's been really interesting to be able to talk with him and hear a lot of the stories that he's experienced out there. So first, I'm going to be giving you guys a brief overview on the topics that I'm going to be discussing throughout this presentation. So first, I'm going to be talking about the country's background, where the country is located, and also I'm going to be talking about the climate of the country and things that you can expect from living out there. Next, I'm going to be discussing the geological influence in Samoan food culture. Since Samoa is an island country, you can expect to see a lot of more homegrown foods and things of that nature. Then I'll be discussing the traditional dishes you can expect to find in Samoa. I'll be talking about the outside influence different countries have had on Samoan food culture throughout the years. And finally, I'll be finishing off by talking about some of the foods that I've been able to try and some of the foods that I enjoy. So first, I'm going to be talking about the country's background. The country of Samoa is located in the Central South Pacific Ocean, and out of all the Polynesian island countries, Samoa is the westernmost one. The climate of Samoa is very humid and tropical, and you can typically see the weather ranging from about 24 to 30 degrees Celsius, which when converted over into Fahrenheit is roughly around 75 to 86 degrees. So the dry season in Samoa usually ranges from May to October. And during those months, that's when you'll see a lot of tourists go and visit the island, and they're trying to miss out on the wet seasons, which usually range between November and April. You can expect to find large amounts of lush vegetation, including island rainforests and cloud forests. And usually all the coastal lines are covered in taro plantations and coconut groves. The island has a limited amount of animal life. However, you can see up to 50 different bird species on the island, and 9 of those species are actually invasive to the island. And this picture at the bottom right of the slide is actually just a picture of the 2 islands. The island itself is comprised of 2 larger islands, and of those 2 larger islands, they're made up of 8 smaller ones. So next, I'm going to be talking about the geological influence in Samoan food culture. So like I referenced in beginning on the roadmap, since Samoa is an island country, you can expect to see a lot of the foods consumed by the people out there are actually grown on the island itself. So of everything grown on the island, the major crops out there include coconuts, taro, mango, and pineapples. When the first settlers arrived on Samoa, they developed the basic agriculture. However, you'll see some of those same crops still being grown and produced today, solely based on the fact that the climate hasn't changed, and it's hard to bring in new things to grow out there. The cuisine is based around fresh tropical fruits and veggies, local grown meats, and also seafood, which is coming straight from the ocean. And some of the traditional island foods out there include veggies such as taro and something called ulu, which is just a certain type of breadfruit. So next, we're going to be getting into some of the traditional dishes that you will find out there. So Samoans are most famously known for this first dish. I'm actually not 100% sure how to say the name. I don't want to be disrespectful, but the second dish is called palusami. And palusami is pretty much prepared by taking taro, coconut cream, onions, and you wrap them up in the whole taro leaf. And I've actually been able to try this dish on multiple different occasions on like family parties and things like that. And I'd say out of every one of the dishes that I have tried, this would be one of my favorite ones. Another popular dish is called oka. And oka is pretty much just a raw fish dish, but it's marinated in a bunch of different things like lemon juice, coconut cream, salt, and onions. This next thing is a strange delicacy out there. It's called sea. And it's typically sold in like soda bottles, something you'd buy like Coke or Pepsi and out here. But instead of it being a beverage, it pretty much consists of the inwards of like sea slugs that you get in the ocean. So that's kind of like one of the strange delicacies that you could find out there. Next, some of the typical desserts that you'll find out there. I'm also not 100% sure how to pronounce this one as well, but the dish is pretty much just dense coconut bread, and you put sweet coconut caramel sauce on top of it. You can see that a lot of the dishes that I'm talking about have one common thing in them, which is coconut, which is one of the main things that's grown on the island. So that kind of just goes with the fact that a lot of the foods that they're eating out there are foods that are actually grown on the island itself. And this picture that I have on this slide in the bottom right, that's actually called an umu, which a lot of the foods that they make is prepared in. And an umu is pretty much an above ground oven. And the way that they heat things up is you use lava rocks. So next, I'm going to be talking about the outside influences on the food culture. So while food and time has progressed, Samoan culture values have persisted, and a lot of those have stayed the same. A lot of my Samoan friends are very strong on their cultural values and things like that. So you're not going to see a lot of things change in their dishes, like food dishes and things like that. So in 1830, Europeans first had contact with the Samoan people. European missions came over and they were trying to convert a lot of people to Christianity. So that was their first contact with the people. And when they did come over, they brought something that would change the Samoan food forever. And that was just canned goods. This was their first instance seeing canned goods. And when they did bring them over, they brought things like canned veggies, fish, and corned beef. And scarcity on the island made these canned goods highly prized items at the time. And during the mid 20th century, that's when a lot of catastrophic natural disasters began to happen. And when those things were happening, Samoa was receiving food aid from multiple different countries like New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. And when that was happening, those countries brought things over like flour, yeast, rice, and they also brought over sugar in great supply. So when a lot of these countries did come in, this was the first instance where these people were seeing things like canned goods and things like that. And that changed a lot of the way that they were preparing, cooking food and things like that. So the bottom right of this slide actually has a picture of Pacific brand corned beef. This is actually things that you can buy from like Polynesian markets out here. And I actually eat this, I'd say like once or twice a week. It's super easy to prepare. You could just throw it on a pan over a fire, and then you mix it with like rice, onions, and things like that. So that's just an example of something that they brought over that's still eaten today. So next, I'll be talking about some of the foods that I've actually been able to try. So first, a lot of these foods that I have eaten were usually at like family dinners or like family parties and things like that. The first dish was the palusami, and that was pretty much just prepared with the taro leaves, coconut cream, onions, and you wrap them all into one thing. The next was just taro itself. And then finally, just a wide range of different marinated chicken, fish, and beef, kind of like the oka that we talked about, the raw fish dish that was marinated in lemon juice, coconut cream, salt, and onions, and things like that. Next was the corned beef that I talked about in the slide beforehand. And then finally was just the, I'm not 100% sure how to say this one either, but this one is pretty much like a dessert or a breakfast item, kind of like pancakes and things like that. But you pretty much just make it by mixing flour, sugar, baking powder, vanilla, 1.5 cups water, and then usually 2 smashed bananas that are ripe. And you pretty much just fry them until they're done. And you can serve it with either like syrup or powdered sugar or things of that nature. My mom actually does make this a lot for breakfast, so I really do enjoy this one. I'd say this one was probably pretty much my favorite. So finally, in conclusion, I've talked about a lot of different topics throughout the presentation. I covered the country's background, where the country was located. I then talked about the geological influences in Samoan food culture. I talked about how it's an island country, and a lot of those things that they grow on the island are the foods that they're consuming on the daily basis. I also talked about some of the traditional dishes you can expect to see. And then I got into the outside influences that people have had on the Samoan food culture, like the Europeans, or during those natural disasters when countries brought in things like canned goods. That was kind of the first time people were introduced to things like that. And then finally, I talked about some of the food dishes that I like the most. and this is just the reference page. So thank you guys.